you all can see, we're here to discuss political issues without getting overly emotional about them, and certainly treating each other with respect and kindness, and who knows, even maybe love and brotherhood. And I just want to quickly introduce Nachshon. Nachshon is a member of this forum for a long time, and he's been helping us in many ways. He will talk about his volunteer work in the Ukraine and offer some insights into how and why the war is fought. He's a security expert with extensive experience in counterterrorism and soft target protection. A political scientist by education, he's also a student of intellectual history, I would say political theory, and an engaging thinker and speaker. Please, Nachshon, uh, please, please take over.
Okay. We do this. Okay. Thank you, Gabriel. Thank you for having me. As you said, my talk will consist of three parts. Firstly, I want to talk about my nonprofit, my volunteer work. Secondly, a brief overview how is the war fought, and lastly, why. Try to unpack the main narratives and why is this war happening. Okay. My nonprofit is called Team for Ukraine. It is a nonprofit organization. You can see the website, the web address at the bottom. Actually, some of you, and I'll get to it later, may not access it because we have been targeted by cybercrime, most likely politically motivated. So we had to do some sort of adjustments. So that just for those of you who won't be able to see our website, we are all volunteer organization, and what we do, mostly we do, I would say, two things. We provide direct aid to our partners, which I think is our big strength because we don't work with intermediaries. We raise money in Czechia. That's where we're based. And based on our contacts with our partners, we are able to provide the specific kind of aid that they need at the time. So this way we can avoid getting them stuff that they don't need, stuff that is already not relevant, and so on. So we have a portfolio of partner organizations, and we work directly with them. Another significant part of our work is war crime monitoring. We work, or our members are experts. We have a criminologist on our team, and people who work with OSCE, with an international organization that monitored the hostilities in eastern Ukraine after 2014. So they work for our monitoring division. And since 2022, we've managed to raise $4.5 million, and that aid we delivered. It's probably a little more worth of aid, because in the first days of the invasion, we just I wasn't on board yet, but the guys were just doing whatever whatever they could, and then just drove there and brought stuff, mostly ballistic protection. That was the first days of the war. So why did I join? Is maybe a question here. Well, first it's threefold. And I love my country. I have not everything is great here, but that's life. I love Czechia. It's my home now. I was born here. I grew up here, and I think, and it's clear that this war is a threat to my country. We'll get to that later. I also, I am sort of in love with Ukraine. It's a romance. I have to say that I was very impressed with the way they reacted to the full invasion in 2022. Their bravery is impressive. Their resolve is impressive. And I think these values are actually very rare these days. So I was very, very impressed with that. And thirdly, I really dislike the way Russia behaves these days. It's a strong sense of repudiation and anger. So this is my motivation for joining. I joined, I remember the day when it happened, I was watching the news or reading the news, and I was saying to myself, I just can't go on like this. So I called a friend of mine who was a member and told him, look, I want to do something, and I thought they would tell me, you're just gonna, move these boxes in some sort of storage, that sort of thing. And a week from that call, I was already in Ukraine, driving with aid, delivering aid to frontline units. So that was pretty crazy. My motivation, obviously, to expand on it. My country was a Russian colony. They used to call it the Soviet satellite, but de facto it was a Russian colony. When communism served as a platform for Russian expansion. It was a non-democratic totalitarian rule, and Czechoslovakia back then was not a sovereign country. Satellite is a euphemism. It was a colony, full-on colony. That was in the last years of the last 2 decades of that colonial status was occupied, de facto occupied by the Red Army. They had tens of thousands of troops, thousands of tanks, infantry fighting vehicles, and building infrastructure for nuclear weapons deployment. And my country was occupied by a donut empire. It's also a theme I'll probably get back to as well later. It's a expression from Professor Sarah Payne that and it describes how a much inferior country when it comes to quality of governance, technology, healthcare, whatever sphere you want to name, manages to occupy and subdue a more advanced country. So this is already me in the plains in the Pontic steppe. This is just outside Kherson, southern Ukraine, close to the Black Sea coast. We have a partner hospital in Kherson, a city that was actually occupied and then deoccupied, liberated by the Ukrainians. A city that suffered tremendously under the occupation and then later by a terrible disaster when the Kakhovka Dam was damaged and the city was flooded. So here is me with my friends unloading a van that we just brought to a Kremenchuk Regional Hospital for War Veterans. It's another major partner. We work with them very closely, delivering mostly medical supplies. But we also partner with frontline units, a unit of Ukrainian Marines and a division, a mechanized brigade of the armed forces of Ukraine, of the army, the land forces. Another activity is we provide also language courses for Czech police. There is over 300,000 Ukrainian refugees in Czechia. Obviously, with that comes with that come lots of problems, increased crime, understandably. So we help to train Czech police to have basic Ukrainian language skills. We provide training and medical supplies even for Ukrainian troops training here in Czechia. We helped the Ukrainian medics with their equipment. And this is already us in the Donbas region. The lady that you can see in the picture in the center, she's the head medic of the brigade, and we brought her lots of medical supplies, disinfection gloves, things like that. But we also do a direct military aid. One of our biggest projects was a delivery of 1,000 RPGs for our partner unit for the 41st Mechanized Brigade. And it was a project that was it was worth over $1 million, and it took about 6,000 small donors to actually raise that money. Another interesting and very visible project was raising money with our partner organizations, partner charities, and purchasing and delivering a demining machine called Bozena. It's a Slovakian manufacturer. They do these things, and we brought it all the way to Kharkiv, eastern Ukraine, to help with demining. You can see the firemen of Kharkiv, because demining in Ukraine now is the agenda is done by firemen. And they have lots and lots of work doing that. This is one of the founding members of our team, Dr. Poiman. He is responsible for war crimes monitoring, and he cooperates with Czech as well as Ukrainian authorities. I have actually spent some time with him, driving around, talking to people, interviewing people. Fascinating work. We're trying also to raise awareness, to network, to try to gain support. We just this past February, we organized, guys who really run the team, and they're very, very busy doing that. They organized conference in the Czech Senate, that's the upper chamber of the Czech Parliament. And we had lots of distinguished guests and speakers. This is the chairman of the Senate speaking, Mr. Vystrčil. We had a chief of general staff speaking, General Řehka. And also we were decorated by the ambassador of Ukraine to Czechia, which was very moving moment. A staple of our aid is ambulances. We partner with different authorities. This is a picture taken during a meeting with the regional governor of the Central Bohemian region, and they gave us a bunch of ambulances that we fixed. These ambulances, obviously, they needed to be replaced by the emergency services, but they were still good enough. So, they were good enough for a place where there is a tremendous lack of anything that it comes to saving lives. So we invest some money into bringing the ambulances into shape and then drive them over to Ukraine. And you can see one of our ambulances already at work in eastern Ukraine, right there. We also do some crazy stuff. We have welders on our team. most of our team are ex-military or police or Army Reserve personnel. So we have insight into things that are very relevant when it comes to helping the Ukrainians. We were given a Jeep that we're converting here into an ambulance, and they're welding a military-grade sheet metal to protect the crew and the patient. And we're gonna hopefully soon we'll be able to drive it over to Ukraine. We have to focus in our work, as I was mentioning during the introduction, that some of you may not even access the website. It's because we've had attempts to compromise our work. Things happen, so we have to be very careful. We have to be careful with what we say, what we share. Closer to the front, obviously, we need to wear ballistic protection, helmets, plate carriers. But a very big issue is traffic. It's quite unsafe, and we drive a lot. One mission can take over close to 4,000 kilometers in driving. The distances are huge. The roads are not always perfect, and things happen. So that's a major issue for us: safety, road safety, but also bureaucracy. Just this last time, I was driving to Ukraine with my friend in an ambulance. The ambulance was to be donated to our partners, and it was full of aid. And the people at the Polish-Ukrainian border, the Polish border guards, they told us that this crossing, we can't bring aid anymore. So these things happen. We have to deal with it. We have to be flexible, but bureaucracy also can, and we're getting better over time, but bureaucracy can be a major hindrance. Road safety, 3 guys with serious injuries, not life-altering injuries, thanks God. You can see in the picture, the left-hand side picture, you can see that's what the car looked like after the accident. Very nasty looking. And we have to improvise very often. We have to tow a vehicle to save miles. Not always we have enough drivers. So we need to make things work when things are not perfect. Okay, so this is in short what we do. Now I would like to give you a very brief overview about the war itself. This is not going to be a scholarly presentation. It's what I'm aiming to do is an outline of things that are relevant for some of you who may not be up to date, who didn't have time to follow the news closely in the past 3 years. So what I want to do is just to give you some sort of full picture. Not going, obviously we can't do that now into all these different details. So this is my brief outline. To my mind, the war started already in the early 20th century. That's when first attempts for Ukrainian statehood were attempted. They were short-lived, and Ukraine ended up, as we know, as a part of the Soviet Union. Then in 2014, after a period of lingering sort of between the East and the West, Ukraine was a victim of a hybrid operation. Then again, there was a whole background, the revolution of dignity, and so on. But the current war started in the hot war started in 2014. when Russia launched a hybrid operation, and they claim that there are separatists in eastern Ukraine, and that they are persecuted, and so on and so on. And then obviously, 8 years later, they launched a full-on attack, full-on military invasion that, thanks God, didn't succeed. As of now, 18% of recognized Ukrainian territory is under occupation. It's a big chunk of land. It's over 100,000 square kilometers. It's about the area of Tennessee. 3 million Ukrainians are believed to live under Russian occupation, and close to 7 million people from Ukraine are now refugees, internal and also. No, this is actually the number that is external refugees. This is people outside of Ukraine that flood the country. The front itself, the line, according to the Dupuy Institute, is over 1,000 miles long. That's a very, very long line of contact. It's not some sort of a limited war in sense of space. 1,000 miles is like driving from New York City to Orlando, Florida. It's a very, very long line with certainly hotspots. There are not really active military operations that stretch along that line everywhere, but there are obviously hotspots. That's one front. There is another front that we, especially I think in the Western media, is definitely not mentioned almost at all, and that's the fact that Ukraine is being constantly attacked from the air. There are air raids and air attacks on Ukraine on a daily basis. People die there every day. Civilians, that is, of course, children, women, the elderly, because of drone strikes, missile strikes, or bombing. And that is happening almost all over the country, including Kyiv, the capital, and all the major cities. So that's like almost like a war on two fronts, you could say. There is a third front that could be the maritime theater in the Black Sea, where the Ukrainians are actually being very, very successful, and they basically paralyzed the Black Sea fleet of the Russians, which is absolutely fascinating. You can see this is a map where you can see in the darker this right here are the occupied territories, including Crimea. The black territories are liberated, deoccupied territories that were under Russian control. And the yellow is the rest of Ukraine. Now, the war is extremely devastating when it comes to lives. It's just I'm just saying very bluntly. The Russians are losing over 1,000 soldiers a day. Every single day, 1,000 soldiers that are either killed or wounded or missing. So the Russian military is suffering tremendous amounts of attrition. It's close. They have lost so far close to 900,000 men. Big parts of their stockpiles of military equipment is gone. They have lost 10,000 tanks, over 20,000 of artillery systems, etc., etc. However, the Russians obviously know that this is a meat grinder, and they don't want to send their own white ethnic Russians to fight. So very often the people who are recruited, and also because of strong financial incentive, uh, the people who join the army are not ethnically Russians. There are people from Siberia, past the Ural Mountains, Buryats, Kalmyks, and so on, people from the far north. And something last seen probably in World War II, I think that the Germans tried that, not very successfully, enlisting convicts. So the convicts that the Russians enlist, they get a pardon very often. They get a little lower benefits, but they still get out of prison. And some prisons had to, I'm told, some prisons had to just close down because they were just empty and they were emptied. The Russians are being aided actively by North Korea. I think most of you have heard that the North Koreans joined the fight, and there were about 10,000 North Koreans at one point deployed in Russia. And also donkeys. We have some interesting information that they are using donkeys as well. Okay. Ukrainians, as I said, they're losing people every single day. Every single day, Ukrainian women, children, elderly men are dying. They have lost about 12,000 civilians, many more wounded. And the military, ZSU, they, according to their own sources, they have about 50,000 soldiers killed in action and close to 400,000 wounded. So you can also, that's a huge disproportion. Only shows you how the Russians are fighting actually in a way that is just totally disrespectful to human life as a general value. The Russians, they don't fight on their own. There is a whole axis of ill will. The Russians are aided, as I mentioned, by the North Koreans. They're obviously supported by Iran. The Shahed drones are very, very commonly used in those attacks against civilians. Now they call it civilian infrastructure. That's again like a nice euphemism. It means just bombing cities where people live. That's all it means. So the Iranians are providing that. Chinese are providing lots and lots of dual use technology. And obviously there is a partnership of the Middle Eastern terrorist groups with Russia that goes back decades, actually. Now, the war is not only a kinetic war or a hot war somewhere in the trenches and fields and villages in Eastern Europe. It is a war that is fought by various different means and different places. Russia uses terrorism and murder to achieve their goals. A big front, maybe a fourth front, you could say, is a disinformation and false narrative creation. They have a long tradition in doing that. They have managed to sort of plant narratives in the Western discourse that sort of create this sense that we don't really know who started and why it started, and there were separatists. And is Ukraine a country? Is it not a country? And it's not black and white, and the truth is probably somewhere in the middle. So all this, if you have this in your mind, it's because the Russians were working very hard to do that. They interfere in election processes. They interfere politically, and a big area is. Another front is cyber. Cyber, not in terms of maybe false Twitter accounts, etc., but cyber, and as in cyber terrorism, damage, ransomware, that sort of thing. That's a huge thing. We also have on our team somebody who's a information technology and cyber warfare expert. So before we focused primarily on the direct aid to our partners in Ukraine. We trained Ukrainian police and authorities because my team goes back to the early days of the war and before the re-invasion, before the full-scale invasion started, we tried to support civil society and Ukrainian authorities in many different ways. Fiscal corruption, obviously, the Russians are bribing lots of people to promote their cause, but also, and that's part of this sort of like of this subversive, insidious effort for creating a sort of multiple truths, if you wish. And that's a corruption of academic discourse, creating different narratives that, historiography is the main victim here and the main battlefield. Just a quick few examples already in 2014, and that's very close to home. As many of you in the audience know, there are some people from Czechia. This is a famous case when a large ammunition depot was blown up by Russian agents. That's already 9 years ago. 2 people were killed during that explosion. But again, just to remind you, Russia goes so far that it uses chemical agents, chemical weapons to murder and to send a signal to others. This is what we're ready to do. Be afraid of us. More recently, Russia tried to plant explosive devices on DHL planes. The DHL, something like FedEx, let's say. So that was thwarted. Another thing very popular these days is cutting undersea cables, communication cables. That happened to the Finns just recently. Cyber attacks, I mentioned, very, very, very common. In this area, as Gabriel mentioned, my background is in counter-terrorism, and it's been happening for quite a while now that terrorist organizations very closely cooperate with criminal elements. It's not this purely politically motivated environment. It's they use often organized crime and etc. This is even more true in the case of the Russians and the cyber attacks. They use and recruit and hire cyber criminals and then use them for attacks against hostile powers, which is almost everybody now. The war is genocidal. It's very, very painful for me to say that. The most glaring case is the case of the children that have been stolen from Ukraine. And we're talking about close to 20,000 children now in Russia and being subjected to Russian education. That means Russification. They're not allowed to speak Ukrainian, obviously meet their families, and they're given, if they're small, they're given up for adoption. In the broader sense of genocide, the original Lemkin definition, obviously, genocide is also an act of willful destruction of cultural heritage in an attempt to destroy that heritage and kind of deny the nation connection with their own history and heritage. So libraries are destroyed, churches, museums, especially museums. We had cases of museums of Ukrainian nationalists, of people who led the struggle in the first half of the 20th century. People like Machno, Shukhevich, these museums were precisely targeted. They attacked hospitals. Also, I have witnessed such an attack where where a missile exploded very close to a clinic in Kharkiv. Again, interesting observation from my counter-terrorism career is a certain similarity here. When the Russians are using double tap attacks, they attack a certain place. When the first responders arrive, firemen, police, ambulances, and they attack the same place again. That's the same MO the terrorists are using. I'm sure our friends from Israel are very familiar with that. Attacks on civilian infrastructure I mentioned. Yeah, basically killing people, killing ordinary people, and using WMDs. This is a story that, again, I think slipped the Western minds to a great extent. They are using weapons of mass destruction, chemical agents to a certain extent at the front. And then also we have those famous massacres, the butchery that the Russian did in places like Bucha, Irpin, or Izium. Izium I personally visited. Oh, actually, I've been to all these places, but in Izium I saw those burial grounds, the mass burial grounds. We'll get to that soon. So yeah, it is very it's very emotional when you see a building that is being just blown up, and then you see like the bowels of the buildings. You see the rubble, you see pictures, you see furniture, toys, clothing, footwear, appliances, just everything in one big mess. This picture I took in Kramatorsk in eastern Ukraine. It was 1 or 2 days after a Russian missile hit a residential building there. I think this you can see for yourselves. This is a kindergarten after Russian shelling in now quite infamous place in northern Kharkiv called Pivnichna Saltivka, Northern Saltivka. There's a kindergarten that just looks very eerie. Again, you can see children's socks, toys, shoes, books. It looks eerie and very, very disturbing. Pictures from summer vacation. It's almost like these intimate things are suddenly you see this disruption of the private and public in this sort of like obscene and murderous way. It's a very, very unpleasant sight. Again, this picture I took in Kramatorsk in Ukraine, same area. You can see very often just whole villages destroyed. There is no distinction, civilian, military. The Russians, they don't have that distinction. So this is Bohorodichne in eastern Ukraine, Donbas region, and this is now the well-known burial place, the mass burial place in Izium. Izium was occupied by the Russian forces. They discovered soon after the Russian retreated a mass grave or mass burial site of over 400 bodies, mostly civilians. I think only 20, closer to under 20, 17 military. Only there were elderly people with diapers, that sort of elderly people murdered and just thrown into these pits. Yeah, that's just a genocide. That's not just a war. That's much more than that. The U.S. Department of State, they I think that Biden didn't do much about it, but they recognized themselves that the Russians were using chemical agents in Ukraine during the war. There were complaints by the soldiers. I encountered that story several times in Ukrainian media, and yeah, even the Americans knew about it. Nothing much happened, unfortunately. Uh, yeah, this is again genocide. Even UNESCO estimates that the terrible damage to culture, galleries, libraries, concert halls, all these things totally destroyed without any military objective except to annihilate the nation as is and its culture. There is a video you can look up maybe later. Even he's not ashamed. There is a video of him talking to a woman who just stole a child from Kherson, and the woman says, "Oh, we just found her, and she's our son now. She's our son. Like we're very happy we have her." So yeah, very chilling. The destruction is tremendous. It's New York Times. They made an analysis and they're estimating over 200,000 buildings destroyed. Uh, yeah, most obviously civilian buildings. That is another level of damage that is crazy. Is the amount of ordnance. Kakhovka Dam damaging, I already mentioned. The Kakhovka Dam was actually very similar to the Hoover Dam in Western United States, or it's half of Lago di Garda, if you're from Europe. So that amount of water just spilled. The Russians wanted to hold the Ukrainian advance in southern Ukraine, and the results are terrible. Very briefly now about the asymmetry of the war. Ukraine is a democratic country. Russia is an authoritarian country. Political culture in Ukraine is that Ukraine is a political nation with Western aspirations. Russia is more ethnically based and is more, that's what they say about themselves. They're civilization on their own. Essential aspect also that is very, that I personally like a lot is their horizontal approach to authority. They're very egalitarian. They inherited this from the Polish rule during the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. The Poles had a very had a system of lots of lots of small aristocracy, minor aristocracy, very egalitarian. And obviously the Cossack tradition, very egalitarian. Russia is exact opposite. It's very vertical. The Tsar used to own all the land, all the people. There was no opposition from the aristocracy. The Ukrainians are very individualistic. The Russians are way more collectivist. Again, we talked about the civilian competent distinctive that the Russians just do not have. And Ukraine is, I think we can make easily a claim that Ukraine is a Western, in the broader sense, is a Western country. Part of Ukraine is Catholic. They have a tradition of municipal autonomy. The Russians are way more horizontal again. Vertical when it comes to power. And I think the best way maybe to show you the distinction is modernization. The Ukrainians see it as an opportunity, and the Russians see it as a threat. It's a threat to the regime. It's a threat to the system. They're much more suspicious. They're much more suspicious about modernization, except industrialization that was obviously embraced. But other aspects of modernization, like democratization, things like that, very, very suspicious. Why it happened? I'm slow. How are we doing with time? Okay, let's just try to do it very quickly. The main narrative in the early days was oppression of ethnic Russians. Um, Vast majority of Ukrainians are actually bilingual. They speak Russian and Ukrainian. So there was they said there was an oppression of Russian speakers. That's nonsense. They're just trying to weaponize history, culture, language. Just on that language note, imagine that somebody from Spain would say that Argentina is not a country because they're also Catholic and they also speak Spanish. Um, so yeah, and I could go on. In 2017, the Ukrainians actually had to introduce Ukrainian language quota in TV because I guess they felt that it was all in Russian. Yeah. Yes, oppression of ethnic Russians, like I said, Zelensky himself is a native Russian speaker. His Ukrainian is he had to improve his Ukrainian as he was assuming office. His show, I don't have time to go into the curious case of his show where he played a president and then he became a president. But that show was in Russian. Um, Again, this hasn't gone away. Denazification. So the Ukrainians are Nazis, whatever that means in 2025. Again, Zelensky is Jewish. The defense minister is Tatar with Muslim roots. The head of armed forces is Russian, General Syrsky. No exceptional cases of anti-Semitism. And Ukraine is multi-ethnic and multi-confessional country. And that is something that I personally like a lot. Even Roma from Western Ukraine took up arms. Some of them joined the mountain division. These guys are from Svolyava, from the Carpathian region. Oh, and every year the students, adherents of Rabbi Nachman, they come to Uman in central Ukraine to his grave. Very often they come there for Rosh Hashanah, and we're talking tens of thousands of Jews flocking into central Ukraine every year to celebrate and to be with their spiritual leader. It is Russia, actually, I would say, that has much greater problem with that kind of stuff, with white supremacy. The Russian imperial movement is just an example. To give you an example, is a white supremacist organization based on Christian Orthodoxy. They have a paramilitary wing, and they have been active in the struggle against Ukraine since 2014. And the Trump administration, believe it or not, they listed them as global terrorists in 2020. Okay, so why again? Why? And I think the major thing these days, and it's been like that for quite some time, is NATO expansion, and Ukraine is not a country. So very briefly, and I'm sure we'll get to that during the discussion, Russian expansion predates NATO by centuries. Russia, again, as sort of a sentiment that Russia has no natural borders. It feels that it's kind of exposed and vulnerable. It needs to expand in order to protect itself. That is not quite true. If you look at Alaska, they went over the Bering Straits. They went over the Caucasus also. That provides a perfect natural border. So you have at least these two cases where it just doesn't fit. And obviously, most of Russia's borders are not with NATO countries. So this sort of phobia I don't buy it. And yes, as I said, NATO obviously created in 1949. In 1946, already in the famous long telegram, uh, American diplomat George Kennan describing the Russian propaganda. Now, this slide is just what he was saying. The Russians are saying to their own people, and the message was that Russia lives in this encirclement by evil capitalist countries, and there is no peaceful coexistence is possible. And Russia needs to be subversive and insidious and work against alliances of other nations because they are hostile. They're imperialist and they're hostile to Russia. Also, a theme that is older than NATO. Okay. Again, Cannon talking about the Kremlin's, that's already his words here, Kremlin's neurotic view of world affairs as traditionally, as Russia having this traditional and instinctive sense of insecurity already. And they won the war. That is 1946, believe it or not. Just to sum up and give you some visuals, here you can see the rate and areas of Russian expansion over time. It is absolutely staggering. Another point of view, another view here, you can see for yourselves. And this is from the from the 1870s already. Russia is viewed with some suspicion, you might say. And on that note, I'd like to end. I do not think that Russia is changing. What we're seeing now in Ukraine is what Russia's been doing for centuries. For centuries, they've been doing it. And I don't think they're going to change anytime soon. So that is from me. And I'm excited to try to answer your questions and have some discussion.
Well, thank you very, very much, Nachshon. And I know you've touched the surface of a lot of issues that are extremely important to us. Let me ask Sophia Stone to please help with moderating the discussion, as she always does so beautifully.
Sure. I invite Alexander to speak. He has his hand up, and we also have questions on our question sheet. So if you are a little bit shy in asking questions, I also invite you to write your question in one of the links. But please, Alexander.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for a very interesting talk, and also for your very courageous and charitable work for a beleaguered neighbor and the people of Ukraine. So, I mean, I'll preface my remarks by saying that obviously I think that both Russia's actual invasion of Ukraine and the way it's waged its war are utterly indefensible. But I want to touch on this issue of NATO expansion, which we've talked about in other contexts. I mean, so this was George Kennan, who you referenced. He said, bluntly stated, expanding NATO would be the most fateful error of American policy in the entire post-Cold War era. And he said it would have an adverse effect on the development of Russian democracy, to restore the atmosphere of the Cold War to the East-West relations, and to impel Russian foreign policy in directions decidedly not to our liking. So already in 1997, George Kennan, the architect of the containment policy against the Soviet Union, was warning the United States not to push this military alliance to the Russian border. So I'd like you to show me why I'm wrong, because, because I can't, even though I regard what Russia did as utterly wrong, I can't help the gnawing feeling that somehow the West completely ignored Putin. Since 2007, Putin was saying that NATO expansion is unacceptable. In 2008, the United States declared that Ukraine and Georgia are going to join NATO in the Bucharest Declaration.
No, I understand. You don't have to expand. I totally understand.
Let me just make one other point. I mean, I mean, in the history of great powers, including the United States, are very nervous about people planting military alliances close to their borders. Many have made the example of Russia put troops in Mexico, how would the United States respond? Won't get into that, but there could be, I grant Russia's imperialistic history, that's obvious, and that many people have suffered under Russian imperialism, but there's also a history of Western invasions of Russia. I mean, if the 21st century goes without an invasion of Russia, it'll be the first one probably since the 15th century. The last Western invasion cost some 26 million Russian lives. So the paranoia on the Russian side may not be totally irrational. I mean, Western countries have, in fact, Napoleon, Hitler. I mean, there's a long history of Western invasions of Russia. So I'm just curious if you can make the best case, and I have an open mind, honestly. I'm willing to grant that I could be totally wrong. I just want to know what the best case is.
Okay. So let me start with this. So you have Cannon, I have Kissinger. Kissinger actually was saying, I only recently I came across a video where he says that NATO should again, actually, I don't like that the way we talk about it, NATO as if it's some sort of animal that grows and tries to do things. No, the countries want to join NATO, and they're coming to NATO. We want to join. It's not that America or France is coming to Poland and say you should join. It's always the other way. So, okay, why let these people join? So. My argument would be, and Ukraine actually, no, let's say like this. The best argument would be that there is no vacuum in politics. In foreign politics, especially, I don't think there is. So either there's going to be Western rule in Central Europe, or there's going to be Russian rule or Russian style rule in Central Eastern Europe. So, and Cannon said it. I don't think the Russians really honestly want they are in this sense. I'm not sure they are a nation that really respects in any great sense arguments, treaties, stuff like this. So my point of view, and we've been through this already. So my point of view is, what are we going to do with Central Eastern Europe? It's you know what? It's the same amount of people as Russia. It's 130 million people we're talking about, including Ukraine and the Baltic states, the former inner colonies of Russia, of Soviet Russia. So now 140 million Russians are saying to 130 million East and Central Europeans, we don't want you to join. We disregard your sense of insecurity and suspicion because of us. We disregard that you want to be allied in case of an attack with someone else because you have a terrible, terrible experience with us. We disregard that. What you understand? So what if I would be impartial, if somebody came to me, these people want safety because they have had a terrible, terrible experience. And another guy said, no, this is not safety. We did terrible things, but we don't care. And we want these people to be sort of like in this sort of like neutral zone. I would trust the first guy.
So thank you. Let's invite Ricardo to speak.
Here, okay. Thank you. So my question is actually about I would really like to know how is the Ukrainian people's, or at least those you have talked about, perception of Alexander Dugin's whole systematic idea, if they have any, and what am I talking about? So Dugin, he sees Ukraine as part of the Russian world. He sees Ukraine
Yeah,
as
just like
part.
Putin, of course.
Yes, yes. So he sees that as like a broader cultural, spiritual Russia, which should include Ukraine and Belarus also. So his political philosophy is based on a deep rejection of Western liberalism, individualism, and globalism, which he sees that. So he sees that Russia is being opposite to that, and that Ukraine is being closer to this side than the Russian side. And then he sees that the United States and NATO, he sees that then they both are promoting a unipolar world, which Russia should be like a barrier against. Now, Dugin's view has a very deep religious and esoterical influence. You can get as far as René Guénon, for example. And he sees the conflict at the end of the day as a struggle between good, which is, of course, the spiritual Russian side, and the evil, which is the decadent materialist West and so on. So you can find, as I said, if you would get like René Guénon's the sign, no, the reign of quantity and the sign of times. It's in French, the original. You will have a very similar discourse to what Dugin is trying to apply in his political actions. And then, in his view, the war is much more than geopolitical. It became something like a sort of religious war. Now,
Absolutely.
how is the Ukrainians' view of this whole idea? I mean, is this idea like, are they aware of it? And how is the.
I think I got you. Okay.
Thank you.
So I don't meet academics. I don't meet them obviously in person. If I hear somebody on that level from Ukraine, I hear a lecture online, that sort of thing. Obviously, I meet normal people. I meet nurses, doctors, soldiers, regular guys. I don't think they've ever heard about Dugin. So in general, this existential struggle is not only on the Russian side, it's on the Ukrainian side, to be very broad. They feel that their nation and their country are in existential danger. So it is existential for some Russians on some sort of abstract spiritual philosophical level. It is very, very real and tangible for the Ukrainians. So they understand this level of that it's not some sort of like a borderline skirmish. This is an existential war for the Ukrainians. However, they understand that these Russian claims, and they hate them. They have heard for decades. They have been told we are all Slavic nations, which is Slavic is something from anthropology from 1,000 years ago. There are Slavic languages, Germanic languages. You know, the English don't come to the Swedes and they don't tell them we are brothers. From historical reasons, that's a different story in Central Eastern Europe. But they know these narratives, so they know that the Russians have been saying we are all brothers. Now, Mike, I'm gonna answer your question with another question, like what came first? Was the idea of that Ukraine is some sort of magical spiritual wellspring of Russia, what was first, that notion or that Russia wants another territory? And my claim is that they want the territory, and then they create a narrative why they want to. There's so many nations that don't have any narratives, and they are fine. I mean, I don't know what kind of narrative Brazil has, and they're doing okay. No?
Yeah.
You understand? It's a one thing to talk about these things at a university, but if you're living in a country day to day, with or without a war, the Ukrainians, they know, from what I know, it's the Ukrainians that they know they are the true Russians. That's the funniest thing. Rus, the old Rus, is the area around Kyiv. There was no Russia. The word, even the etymology is Ukrainian, right? Or connected with the territory of Ukraine. So I'm not sure if I think they're aware of the fact that the Russians are appropriating their own history. They're aware that the center of Eastern Christianity was in Kyiv. They know all that. Now, you mentioned one more thing, unipolar. Look, and this is going to take us a whole different dimension. But look, unipolar world was something that the Western media came with, and the people who resented it, maybe that Russia lost the status of a superpower, and now only America remains. So they started to call it unipolar. I don't know. Are the Nigerians frustrated that the world is unipolar or not? You understand? Like, there's so many nations. Why would you? It's only if you have a global imperial ambitions that you suddenly need to question unipolar, multipolar. And even if you're gonna say democracy is expanding and it's encroaching, and there obviously we had Iraq, Afghanistan. I'm not denying that. But most non-democratic countries are not bombed by the US Air Force. And most countries in the world are not democracies.
Nachshon,
So again,
other questions?
yeah, sorry, I got carried away.
Okay, I invite Roman to speak, and then we have questions from our question sheet.
Okay, thank you. To Alexander's remarks that Russia had been invaded. Yes, of course, by Napoleon, by Hitler. But look, in the last 250 years, every single European country had been invaded by somebody. Every single. That was the way it happened in the past. But now there is only one European country which loves to invade their neighboring countries, and that's Russia. There is no other European country who would like to invade another. And we must be honest that Russia is the only imperialist power in Europe today. Britain, is it thinkable that Britain would say, well, we know we have given Ireland independence some 100 years ago, but oops, sorry, that was a mistake. We are going to reconquer you. Or France telling to Algeria, well, we granted you independence 60 years ago, but sorry, you should be a part of larger France. It's completely unthinkable. The only country which thinks in the imperialist categories today in Europe is only Russia. And as Russia had been invaded, well, Russia invaded other non-Russian countries in the past as well. Let us say Poland, the partition of Poland. Poland, Slavic but Catholic. Or even another example, Finland, non-Slavic country, Lutheran country, conquered by Russia, added to Russian Empire. So Russians are right that they had been invaded in the past, but they did the same. Everybody did the same in the past. And today, only Russians would like to invade neighboring countries. No other single European country.
So, Roman, do you have a question for Nachshon? It's okay if you don't. I just want to clarify because we're running out of time.
I have just one question. What Nachshon would think would be the prudent thing to do today when we see that the American foreign policy, Trump administration position has changed towards a more neutral position between aggressor and invaded country? What should be our European or yes, what should be our European position be today? What should we do today?
Yeah, well, it's difficult to say because I don't want to say 3 years ago, I would say arm, 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 and provide as many weapons to the Ukrainians as you can. Now, not much of that happened in the past 3 years. And I don't know what else should I say. I tell you what the Ukrainians think. If that would be maybe better answer. So the Ukrainians know that there is no alternative. It's not that like we're gonna lose some area of our country and then we go back to normal and everything's gonna be okay. We're gonna write off a few millions of people who are gonna become Russian citizens. We're gonna write off cities, industries, resources. We're just gonna wave our hand and then go on, sign a piece of paper. We had that piece of paper already. We've had it from since the 90s, and it didn't do any good. So the dilemma is like this. The dilemma is between war and suffering and subjugation. I understand that maybe my answer is not gonna make you happy. It's not what to do. I don't have a recipe. Now with the United States, I don't know what to tell you. The bottom line is the Russians are not gonna stop. And they've said it many times. They have said it. Putin said that the end of Soviet Union, which doesn't mean the Soviet Union and its borders, it means the colonies that I was talking about in Central Eastern Europe. That was Soviet Union. That was Russia and its two-tier colony system. And he said that when this colony system was over, that was the greatest tragedy. So there you go.
So we have a few more questions. I'm going to share my screen.
Oh, I like that. That's great. So question one, when the war ends, what's next for us, for my nonprofit? We've actually talked about it already. We had a meeting about a month ago and we talked about it. So we would definitely want to focus on there would be so much, and that's something that gives me so much hope. There is so much opportunity in Ukraine. Something I haven't mentioned. When I first got there 2 years ago, there was a sense in Ukraine that was incredibly motivating. It was the sense of that I remember from the 1990s, the early 90s in Czechia, in Czechoslovakia, this sort of sense of hope, optimism, change. And I felt that like now we are becoming a real nation. Like the war made us into a real nation now. It's just like, yeah, we speak this, we did that. Now it's all over, and the direction they want to head is the West. So that was a very optimistic, and I still have that sense of opportunity. I think that Ukrainians are extremely creative. Especially people in the West, but even in the Central Eastern Europe, in these nations, you wouldn't call Ukrainian exactly a innovative or a somebody who's entrepreneurial, that sort of thing. But I think they have that. I have actually seen. I have spent some time living in Israel, and I have to admit, I have seen similar vibe in Israel and in Ukraine. That sort of like. Don't worry about the former rules so much. That sort of like, let's make it happen. Let's think how we can improve. This kind of like improvising, building better, making things better, good for business. I can see great opportunity in Ukrainian creativity, Ukrainian resources. So I'm very optimistic. So what's next? Phew, the sky's the limit. Me personally, I would love to work with on an environmental project. There is an incredible amount of environmental damage in Ukraine right now. I'd love to be part of something that helps them with that.
Okay, so we have one more question.
Russians losing sounds like what we read from Ukrainian Defense Media, which I have always assumed is biased. Right. So that's a good point. The numbers are never 100%. We don't know 100% who, what are they, how many people they're losing. I don't think even the Russians know how many they're losing. But the reason why I'm inclined to believe that is the things that are behind the numbers. So if you look at how long does it take to field a soldier for the Russians, they don't even give them the basic training in the Western conventional sense. 2 weeks and you're off to the front. I tell you something, even more. I have been to the operation room of the 41st Mechanized Division. I have spoken to the head of the staff of the not division, brigade. I have spoken to the head of the staff of the brigade, and he showed me in the control room, in the situation room, that we could see thermal footage from like basically the line of contact, and you could see the Russians moving, and I couldn't believe it. I have a very limited military background, but I knew something about soldiering, and these were just guys, just like a pack of guys just walking through a forest. Like the amount of, I don't want to disregard all of them at all times. They are adapting, they're learning, they're much better than 3 years ago, no doubt. But from what I have seen and what I've read and what I understand about Russian military, as well as other things, I would tend to believe it because, again, this is not the first time they're doing it. The Russians fight in this way. They have been doing it for decades, if not centuries. Like, look at the way they fought in World War II. Waves of people, waves and waves and waves of people, throwing humans guns. So if I hear that the Russians, it was first 800, and I thought, oh my goodness, 800, that's a lot now. And it grew and grew and grew. And now we've been stuck with this number. So it may not be 100% accurate, absolutely. But from all this other kind of evidence, I would assume that it may be very close to reality.
Okay,
Thank you,
thank you
Nachshon.
for the question. Yeah,
Oh,
so it can be, so I just want to thank you.
Oh, thank you. Pavel had his hand up, but he had his real hand up and not his digital hand, and so I missed it. So I'm going to invite Pavel to speak.
Just few things, as Nachshon pointed out rightly. In Europe, if Germany starts to buy new tanks, France is not thinking about enlarging the border bunkers. It's absolutely crazy here. Second, Moscow Empire grew for 400 years per 160 square kilometers per day, relentlessly. And of course, mostly in inhabited territories, but also gobbled up ancient kingdoms. And since 18th century, Russia actively intervened in European history. They were allied with this state, that state. They were busy meddling in the European affairs. And of course, they did it after 1918. They wanted to imposed, even in Germany, in my country, communist regimes. Actively, they had their stormtroopers on the ground, the communist parties, completely subservient to Russia. So speaking about Russia being justly afraid of Western intervention is absolutely rubbish. Finally, the last thing which was not mentioned here is Russia is not only after our bodies, they are after our soul. Let me show the example. After 1968, when they crushed Prague Spring and the communist regime was returned, millions of people here had to pass through, appear in front of the commissions. And the commission asked them how they view the entry of the Soviet troops. And the right answer was, it was a fraternal assistance, not the rape, but fraternal assistance. So they were crushing even us in our soul. I can't imagine what would happen if Ukraine loses this fight. What Moscow would force Ukrainian government to teach their children, to spit on the graves of the soldiers who fought for free Ukraine. They would call them Nazis. This is the fight about Ukrainian soul, not only about territory and this mineral resource and that mineral resource. I'm afraid America today, under the new leadership, doesn't have any idea what is going on. Any idea what is going on. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That's the genocidal aspect. The genocide in the broader sense is the destruction not only of the bodies, but of the souls and culture. Absolutely.
Okay, well, thank you very, very much. Let me just comment that this will not be the first time that the United States has no idea what is going on in the places where it is attempting to do something. That seems to be more of the rule than the exception, as far as I can see, unfortunately. And let's hope that the Americans will wake up and start to look at things a little bit more carefully. Thank you, really, Nachshon, for a very interesting and broad presentation of this information. We have not ended this discussion by any means, but this is a great beginning, and we will hopefully have more sessions on this topic. I hope that the next time we have a session on this topic, the war won't be going on anymore. The Russians will be apologizing and paying reparations as they ought to do. And we will be discussing things from a different point of view. But in the meantime, thank you all for coming. And our next talk is going to be on April 22nd. It's a little bit different. It's a special talk. It's in the honor and memory of David Constant, who is a good friend of was a good friend of ours. He died last year, and his yahrzeit, his Jewish death anniversary is on April 22nd. I invited Philip Mitzis, a fantastic classical scholar, to speak on the topic of anger in classical sources, which I think, still an issue today. That's a contemporary issue because we still have that problem with us. So please tune in on April 22nd. You will have notices going out about that. And thank you all very much for coming. It was really great to see y'all.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, Nachshon. Very
Thank
interesting.
you.